Thank you all for tuning in again. I had a request from a viewer to make a video on bilingual language acquisition. So I was really excited to do that, actually. There is a lot to cover, so I didn't put everything in this video. I did do a presentation, PowerPoint. I don't know if people enjoy that or not, but since there's a lot of information, I just wanted to keep myself organized, and also, I don't know, I'm a very visual person. So when I see things in writing, it really helps me. So that's what I decided to do. You guys can tell me, comment and say, hey, next time, can you just talk? If you don't like the presentation or the PowerPoint, I'm totally open to not doing that and just talking. So guys, just let me know. Okay, so I'm gonna do this in parts. So this is gonna be bilingual language acquisition session 1, I called it. And I am going to, the next one I think is probably gonna be more on how kiddos with language delays or language disorders are able to become bilingual, in the research that shows us that. But this presentation is on bilingual language acquisition with a couple extras, and it's based off of research, and I cited some research within the slides, and then I have references at the end. So I'm going to try to make it kind of exciting and informative at the same time, hopefully. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and you will see the presentation that I made, hopefully right now. Okay, so that's obviously the first page. So again, it's on bilingual language development. Session 1 is what I'm calling it. So here we go. I'm just going to go over the contents. It's just real quick. This is basically what we're going to be talking about. There's a couple different ways to acquire two languages. There's called simultaneous acquisition of 2 languages, where you learn them both at the same time. And there's sequential acquisition of language, which I'll describe. Basically, you learn a first language and then learn a second language. And then the next thing after that we're going to discuss is just some more detailed information on development. So like phonological development, babbling, first words, etc. Again, I'm not going into great detail about these because I don't want to bore you guys and keep you here forever. But if you have questions and you want me to have more detail, you want me to go into more detail about anything, please comment and let me know. Okay, and then number 4, just going over some variables that affect acquisition of language or 2 languages. Number 5 is cognitive benefits of bilingualism. I really wanted to go over those. I know I've discussed some myths before in other videos on bilingualism. I just wanted to talk about the benefits, some of the many benefits of being bilingual. And then also I do want to touch again on a few myths and just basically stop listening to myths and listen to these truths. So it's more so that I cite some of the truths about bilingualism that bust up those myths, for lack of better words. And then references. I'll just show you guys my references. And again, there's some references within the slides as well. All right, here we go. So simultaneous bilingualism. So this is where a child acquires 2 languages at the same time, typically by about 3 years of age. So there's a couple stages here for simultaneous bilingualism. Stage number 1 is called undifferentiated. It's essentially a single language system composed of elements of both languages. So the kiddo is not differentiating, not knowing, hey, this goes to this language and this goes to this language. So I mean, this is from the very beginning. So it's very similar to the developmental process that occurs in a monolingual acquisition of a kiddo. So when a child is learning one language. So again, this is simultaneous bilingualism. So when they're learning two languages at the same time, it's very similar to the development processes of monolingual acquisition. So from birth to 2 months of age, there's cooing. That's where we're mostly doing vowels like ooh, no consonants, just vowels and making those types of sounds. And then from 2 years, again, this is bilingual acquisition, and if you know language acquisition, even monolanguage, you'll see that you'll be able to tell that it's pretty similar. So from 2 to 6 months, we have babbling that's going on. So ba 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 ma ma ma, pa ta ta pa ma ma, just constant vowel playing around and babbling. And then from 6 to 15 months of age, we have first words. Now, you might say, so usually when we're talking about monolingual acquisition, sometimes we'll say like 6 to 12 months of age, we hear first words. I mean, every child is different, of course, with some parameters, and so 6 to 15 months, excuse me, may seem like, oh, it might be a couple months more than a monolingual to get the first words, but it's not a huge difference. It's not that big of a difference. And again, all children are different anyway. So pretty similar to monolingual acquisition. So from 6 to 15 months is what I said is the first words. Then from 1 year to 2 years of age, it's called language blend. So parts of words of both languages are blended in the same word, which is very interesting. All right. So then from 2 to 3 years of age in simultaneous bilingualism. So again, sorry to repeat myself a million times, but this is where we're learning two languages at the same time. I just don't want to get it confused. So from 2 to 3 years of age, there's what we call language mixing. Some people refer to it as code switching. People still say code switching. It's a little bit of an older term now. We're kind of encouraged to use the term translanguaging, but essentially it's just using words from the different languages. So if you're learning English and Spanish, or you might mix together some English words and some Spanish words. In 2 to 3 years, you might do that in the same phrase. Or phrases might be adapted to the grammar of the other language. So for example, I might say, let me think. So I might say, quiero una pelota roja. That in Spanish is I want a red ball. So ball, the adjective, the red, comes after ball. In English, I would put red before ball. So I would say I want the red ball. So when you mix those, so let's say, so an example would be, let's say in English, I used the sentence structure of the Spanish. So I said, I want the ball red, where again, so that would be more of a sentence structure of if I was saying it in Spanish, because in English we would say, I want the red ball. So hopefully that I articulated that well. Okay, so that is 2 to 3 years. So then here comes the second stage. So this is called differentiated. So this is where the child starts to differentiate and to know that there are two different languages. So this happens around 4 years and older. So the kids start to use each language as separate systems. So the child learns to associate each language with maybe a different person. So for example, with my mom, I'm going to speak Spanish. Or let's say, I don't want to keep saying Spanish, English. Maybe the child speaks Russian and English, or Portuguese and English. So let's say it's Portuguese and English. And so the child is now knowing, oh, with mom and dad, I speak Portuguese most of the time. And with my neighbor or the my friend that lives across the street who only speaks English, I speak English. So then the child, when they're talking to their parents, most of the time they'll talk in Portuguese, and then when they're talking to their friend, they'll talk in English, because they're now separating the two and understanding that they are two different languages. Not everyone speaks both of them. Or could be they differentiate the situation. So again, at home, we speak Portuguese. When we are at a restaurant or when we are at preschool, we speak English. And so they will speak Portuguese at home, speak English, start speaking English mostly at school. So different people, different situations, or even age groups, they can differentiate. And then the last point here that I have is that if the bilingual child's family switches languages multiple times within the same conversation, so that kind of translanguaging, the child will also learn to do that as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that they don't have a good vocabulary in the first language or a good vocabulary in the second language. It's just a natural thing to do when you're bilingual, is to translanguage, is to switch between languages within the same conversation, sometimes within the same sentence. It just has gotten one of those myths, where people say, oh, well, they switched to English for that word because they don't know the Spanish word. That is not the case based on research. So just wanted to clarify that. Oops. Okay, so now we have sequential bilingualism. So this is where we learn one language first, and then we learn a second language after we learn one language first, and then we learn a second language. So it's just written differently on my slide. Child acquires a second language after acquiring the first language by age 3. So sequentially bilingual children, or a sequentially bilingual child, can draw on knowledge and experience with the first language, from the first language. So when they're learning the second language, they can draw from the knowledge and experience of the first language that they have acquired. Another thing about this sequential bilingualism is temperament and motivation are key components that basically determine the length in which a child will pass through each stage. So if a child is more motivated, they will go through the phases more quickly. And then children who are more socially oriented may learn fixed phrases more quickly in order to help them interact. So if we have a kiddo that really likes to interact and talk to people, they are going to be more motivated to learn the phrases that allow them to talk to people in the second language that they're acquiring. All right. And then this is still sequential bilingualism. So here are the steps. The first language is a normal acquisition. So let's say my first language is Spanish. It's normal acquisition stages, like monolingual acquisition. And then there is an interactional period where you use this. So now we're learning the second language, right? So interactional period, there's a use of nonverbal communication and fixed phrases. So there's some nonverbal, and then there's specific phrases that they use that are, they don't really vary, but they use them for communicating. And then after that, there's what we call an inference period. So this is where the grammatical rules of the first language learned, so Spanish, are applied to the second language. So that, and then after that, there's something that might happen called a silent period, where the child is more quiet. Sorry. The child is more quiet at this time. And then after that period is what we call, so what the older term code switching and the newer term translanguaging occurs. And that's where the child switches between languages in the same conversation. And again, that is very normal. That is typical bilingualism development. I'm so sorry that I keep clearing my throat. Okay. Relative exposure. Okay, this is really important. So relative exposure to the second language compared to the first language can affect how the child develops the second language. So if the child is exposed to the second language at this point just as much as the first language, then they're going to learn it quicker, perhaps learn it more fluently. If they're exposed to the mostly the first language and just like a little bit of the second language, then obviously they're going to learn that second language a bit slower and maybe not possibly not as fluently. So those are just some things that to think about. Okay, so hopefully I haven't lost you. I mean, in terms of like, hopefully you're not bored. So the next thing that I wanted to just discuss is a little bit more in depth of bilingual language development. It's going to we're kind of going to kind of discuss like monolingual and how it bilingual shows some of the same things, essentially. So the first point is babbling in first words. So research suggests that bilingual infants and toddlers produce similar sounds, syllables, and utterance shapes, and even frequency of those utterance shapes when compared to monolingual monolingual peers. Sorry. So here we go. This is great. So our bilingual kiddos that are learning two languages are research is showing that they're producing, similar sounds, syllables, the frequency, utterance shapes, and frequency of utterances. That's awesome. So then the next point is regardless of the two languages heard. So whether it's Spanish and English, Russian and Spanish, or Ukrainian and Russian, or whatever, regardless of the two languages that are being heard, infants and toddlers primarily produce these phonemes, these sounds, stops. So stops are consonant sounds that don't have no airflow. So like P, B, M, T, D, P, B, M, T, D. I probably missed some, but anyway, there's no airflow. Nasals, which are mostly N and M in English, N, M. And then glides, which in English are L and W. And then they're accompanied by vowels produced interiorly in the mouth. So that's interior is in front. Okay, so that's regardless of whether you're learning English and Spanish, or again, like Portuguese and English, or German and another language. So that's a pretty cool fact. It's research based, so it's a fact, yeah. Okay, so here we go. Utterance shapes are primarily consonant vowel, so CV, or just vowel, or CV-CV. So CV-CV is consonant vowel. So in English, it would be baby, mama, dada, and then in Spanish, maybe, well, same thing, mama, papa, bebe. So it's just consonant vowel structures. And then these sounds and syllables and patterns are predominant in babbling and first words, universally in monolingual, and also present in bilingual children. So there you see similarities again. So the last point on this slide is code switching and translanguaging is normal. I've probably said that a bunch of times already, but I just want to really hit that home. I really want to make that point. And I do cite it here also. I got this specific wording in these sentences from Paradis, Nicolaitis, and Genesee in 2000. So code switching or translanguaging is normal in a bilingual child and in a bilingual adult. So again, that's where you're switching between the two languages within the same conversation, sometimes even in the same sentence. And it is rule governed. It's not haphazard. So again, it's not just like it's not just like they don't have the person doesn't have enough vocabulary or the correct grammar in one language, so they're switching to the other. That's not what it means. Okay. I think I've probably overemphasized that. Okay, here we go. So in-depth bilingual language development is continued. So at times, people will misunderstand and misinterpret when comparing vocabulary, repertoire, or size of vocabulary when they're comparing between a bilingual child and a monolingual child. When they're specifically trying to measure the bilingual child's vocabulary. So this is not a fair representation because these bilingual children split their time between two languages. Monolingual children are only learning one language. And then the other reason shows that sometimes when people are comparing the languages, so they're looking at the monolingual English speaker comparing to the bilingual child, and they're only looking maybe at English vocabulary. And so obviously that is not a fair representation because that bilingual child also has Spanish vocabulary, and they're splitting their time, they're learning the two. So the second bullet point says research shows, again, this is all based on the research. Research shows that bilingual children do not lag behind monolingual children when both languages are considered. So when you compare the vocabulary size or repertoire in a monolingual kiddo to a bilingual kiddo, and you're considering both of the languages that that bilingual kiddo is speaking, when you compare those vocabulary sizes, bilingual children's vocabulary sizes are typically either the same or even greater than a monolingual child. So they've also found similar findings of grammatical knowledge. So when you compare the grammatical knowledge of a monolingual child to the grammatical knowledge of a bilingual child, they're also finding the same similarities. So I did cite I did cite a couple articles here where I specifically got that information. Okay, here we go, variables. So we have to think about, there's lots of variables when a child is learning a language and when a child is acquiring or learning two languages. So the first one, exposure. How much exposure is the child getting to both of the languages, right? Are they getting the same amount of exposure, the same amount of time and frequency with both languages? That's obviously going to determine how well they learn and how quickly they learn both languages. So quantity of exposure. So number 2, I have quality of language input. So, this can depend on a lot of different things. But it is really important to provide the child with rich and diverse and engaging opportunities for both languages. If they are only hearing one language, or they're hearing one language more than the other, the quality, sorry. So if the language that they're hearing, the person that is speaking, their vocabulary size their repertoire is large and their grammar is excellent, versus someone who may have lower vocabulary or not as good grammar, that's going to also impact or affect how the child acquires the language, the vocabulary, and the grammar. And then the output of language. So this is a really important one. And if you do speak two languages and you know that if you're ever at a point where you speak one and don't speak the other for quite a while, then when you start to speak the second one or the other one again, you kind of feel rusty, because you're not practicing. And practice is so important when using a language, when being bilingual. So really, it's really important to encourage the child to practice speaking both languages, not just listening to both and speaking one. You got to provide a lot of opportunities for them to speak both languages. So again, if I'm doing Spanish and English, I cannot just, give them most opportunities to speak English and not Spanish and expect them to be fluent in both. They have to have the opportunities to speak in both languages. So a lot of times I tell parents, speak in the language that you're most comfortable with, that you're most fluent with your child at home. That's very important for teaching them proper grammar. If a parent is not fluent in English and they speak, I'm just not going to say Spanish this time. Let's say they speak Portuguese and they're fluent in Portuguese and they're not fluent in English. It is not a good idea for someone to tell them you need to speak to your child in English, because if they're not fluent in English, they might teach them the wrong vocabulary, but not intentionally. They might unintentionally teach them the wrong grammar or syntax. So very important to parents to speak in the language that they are most fluent in and most comfortable in. Very, very important. Okay. So most kiddos can, there's other opportunities, especially if they're in this country. There's a lot of English opportunities in that case to speak English. Okay, and then number 4, letting the child know that it is okay to translanguage. Letting the child know that it's okay to speak English and Portuguese. It's okay to have a conversation where you switch back and forth between the language. It's amazing that you speak 2 languages. A lot of people in this country cannot do that. I say this country because a lot of other countries, people are bilingual or trilingual, and it's another reason why we know that bilingualism or even multilingualism does not cause language delays. There are so many people outside of this country, of the United States, that they're in other countries and they grow up automatically. They're learning 2 languages in the home because their parents are bilingual. They speak, sometimes it's English and whatever, like in Germany, English and German. Or my husband is from Kenya. There's 3 languages that he speaks because there's a tribal language and there's Swahili and English. And he grew up with all 3 of them, and it didn't cause a language delay or disorder. And not just in him, but like in so many countries, there's so many people that speak more than one language and don't have language delays or language disorders. So I just wanted to put that in there as well, because sometimes when we are in this country, we forget that our experience is not the same as the rest of the world. Some things are positive and some things are negative when you think about that, but we won't get into all of that. There's a lot of positive things out in other countries of this, countries that are not the United States. A lot of positive things. All right, so anyway, cognitive benefits of bilingualism before I go off on a different tangent. So research shows that simultaneous exposure to 2 languages is related to several cognitive benefits. Woohoo! Awesome. This is so cool. Okay, and it does not, I know, you're like, Beth, this is the millionth time you've said this. It does not cause language confusion or delay. It does not. Okay, I'm done there. Bilingual infants as young as 7 to 12 months are more flexible learners of language patterns than monolingual children. That is a study from Kovacs and Miller in 2009. I got the information specifically. The next one, attention needed between two languages learned fosters children's thinking and leads to increased metacognitive and metalinguistic skills. Yes. I have a citation there as well. They have kiddos, they have to attend to the two different languages. They have to go back and forth, metacognitive, metalinguistic. We're talking about planning, multitasking, all kinds of cool things. So bilingualism does foster that. There's research that shows that. And bilinguals perform equally well or better than monolinguals when both languages are considered in general. Okay. Yay. All right. Yay. Stop listening to myths. Listen to these truths below. And these are research-based. Bilingualism enhances brain connectivity. Bilingualism has shown, the bilingual brain has shown improved communication between brain regions. It has been shown by research has shown, studies have shown that it enhances inhibition of one language while using another. Provides better attention to task and switching capacities. Because you have to, when you're learning the two languages, you have to attend and switch back and forth. Bilingualism strengthens memory capacity, leading to better academic performance and daily task management. Yay! This is all positive stuff about being bilingual. Okay, and demonstrates improved problem solving and multitasking skills bilingual brains do. Okay, and remember, it does not, I know I wasn't going to say that, it does not cause delay or language disorder. I also want you to remember that children that do have language delays or disorders are also, research has shown, they are also very capable of becoming bilingual. Okay, just want to keep that in mind. I don't have that on there, but I might have it on a different slide. All right, more truths and some suggestions. Bilingualism, again, does not cause language delays or disorders. Okay, you should not stop speaking and or exposing your child to their first language if they do have a language delay or disorder. So there you go. Unfortunately, it still happens. It shouldn't, because we have so much research, but unfortunately it still happens where people or some professionals sometimes will still say, oh, your child has a language delay, your first language is Spanish, they're learning English at school, you need to stop talking in Spanish to them. You need to only speak to them in English. Oh, that's such wrong information. First of all, like we said before, if the parent is not fluent in both languages, they could accidentally teach the wrong grammar, the wrong vocabulary. Also, there's no reason to do that. Language delayed kiddos can become bilingual. Even if the parents are fluent in both their first language and English, they still shouldn't stop speaking to them in their first language. So if it's Spanish, Spanish, if it's German, German, whatever it is, there's no research that supports that at all. Exposure to two languages does not interfere with cognitive development. If your child refuses to speak your primary language at some point, which is very typical of bilingual kids, especially if there's just one language, their primary language is spoken at home, and then they go at school, the language that people speak is predominantly English. They might just want to speak English because they might, whether they think it's not cool to speak their primary language with their peers or whatever the reasoning. If they're refusing, just keep speaking in your primary language, your first language. So again, if that's German, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, whatever it is. Sometimes it's a phase, but don't stop speaking to them in the primary language, in your native language. And read to your children in your primary or native language also. Very important. Okay. Yay. Okay. So these are some references. Again, I cited some research within the different slides. And then these are articles that I got a lot of this information from. So, and then within their articles are more references. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that it was useful for you, especially the viewer that requested bilingual language acquisition. Okay, so if you have questions, comments, guys, please put them in. Let me know. Ask questions. Make comments. Again, if it was too much information, not enough information. If you like the slides, if you don't like the slides, if you want me to just start talking and keep talking without any visuals, whatever works. I really want to just get information out and help whoever, parents, professionals. And I always say that I am always learning as well. So if I said something that you guys feel is not correct, or if you have more to add that I don't know about, please also comment on that. Let me know. I am always learning. I hope we are all always learning. I am open to whatever comments and questions you guys have. And again, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.